Welcome to our video where Adjoa and I talk about being white people.
I am not seen as a white person in Australia.
And for a long time, I think I felt insecure about like, oh, I'm not like a real Asian because like I can't even speak my language.
I do remember kids making comments about my skin, about my hair.
Which finger is Asian and which finger is like white? Like you don't live with borders, you're just you.
Max and I are here on the channel for our first collab. One thing that Max and I have connected over and we're going to dive in this video is how it was like for us growing up coming from two different cultures. And I'm really interested to hear your experience, Max, but we're both going to be providing our input. Let me provide some context of where this idea came from. Around 2016, even as early maybe as 2013, I stumbled across this tag on YouTube called the Mixed Girl tag. I really found the questions super interesting. I thought that these questions would be helpful for us to discuss this topic. Everyone watching, this is a mukbang. So if you want to grab a snack, something to drink or eat, Max and I have some food that we're going to share with you what we're going to be eating.
So I made an Okinawan dish today. This is goya champuru. I don't know how easily that can be seen. I'm pouring it on my computer. Oh my gosh, let me... So this is going swimmingly well.
You can't make this stuff up.
The namesake of the dish, goya, which is a Southeast Asian bitter melon. Here's one of those.
It sounds like a dish I would personally really enjoy. Would you like to see what I have? I apologize to my West African brothers and sisters. I am not portraying all the nourishing, beautiful dishes in this video. It's good we have a balance here. This is malt. This is very popular in West Africa. This might be familiar to other cultures as well. It's called Mirinda, and it's basically like an ethnic sun-kissed Fanta, but nothing beats soft drink out of a glass bottle when you're on the African continent. I have 3 varieties of plantain chips. This is called chin. I think it's chin chin. It's a Nigerian sweet biscuit. So Max, what is your biracial identity?
My dad is from Okinawa. It's part of Japan politically now. Got annexed in the 1800s, but geographically, it's kind of in this like middle point between Japan, China, and like the Philippines and Indonesia and stuff like that. Like, so yeah, my dad and his family came over from there to the States initially, and that's where my mom is from. My mom's from Michigan in the United States. People would always ask me like, what are you? I'd be like, I'm Canamera Japanican. Is that a good enough answer for you? Like, if you know anything about Canadian society, Canada is not hugely nationalistic, but Canadian nationalism is mostly just being really passionate about not being American. So like, even though I grew up with like an American parent in the household, the rest of society that I grew up in was very much like, America bad, we don't like them type of thing. And so like, I think I internalized a lot of that like growing up in Canada. So I think for the most part, like, I spent my life kind of just being like, I'm a Japanese Canadian with like American influences. And then it's been like later on in my life that I've really tried to plug into Okinawa.
My biracial identity is my dad is originally born in Ghana. I actually did an ancestry DNA test like a few years ago, and like my ethnic roots are all in West Africa. So very much Ghana, which was part of a wider kingdom. And my mom, she is originally born in Australia, but her descent is English and Irish. If you are not aware of Australia's history, it is still a British colony. We are still in the Commonwealth. There's a very complex history here with race.
Same.
Yeah.
That's one of the interesting dynamics at play for this conversation, is that we're both within like the historic territory of the British Empire and not the United States. Like I still live in a monarchy technically, right? Which is interesting. Like a colonial monarchy.
When you have a biracial identity, often you can be a bit racially ambiguous. I'm interested to know what ethnicities, what racial identities have you been mistaken for?
The guesses that I've gotten are so all over the place, it's kind of crazy. First and foremost, I think within Canadian society, most people are just like, oh, that's a white guy. That actually gave me a lot of insecurity growing up, because I was like, I grew up with quite a lot of Japanese culture in my house. Like, even though like we weren't speaking the language that much, like I was really connected to my grandparents. We went to a Japanese church. We ate a lot of Japanese food, and I consumed a lot of Japanese media. So like to me that was there. But then I would look at myself in the mirror and be like, I'm not Asian, like even a little bit at all. And like obviously my appearance has changed over time. So like there have been times in my life where I've looked more Asian or more white or whatever, but I was always insecure. I was just like, oh, I don't really, like, you wouldn't know. And for a long time in my life, people would look at me and just be like, oh, white boy, that's it. People will guess other Asians. They will guess Japanese last. And I just don't expect anyone to ever guess Okinawan, because nobody knows what that is. When I'm in Toronto, I have had Chinese people who speak English just fine come up to me and start talking to me in Chinese. On the one hand, I've grown up with so much of this experience of just being like, I don't think I look Asian at all. But then that will happen to me, and I'm just like, huh. Oh, okay, interesting. I've gotten Filipino, I've gotten Samoan, I've gotten like a bunch of different like kind of Pacific Island, like Southeast Asian types of guesses from people. Ever since I've grown my hair out long, Latin American guesses. They'll just be like, are you Mexican? Are you Venezuelan? Are you Guatemalan? Like, this is the funniest one though. I had an undercut at one point, and my hair was short on top and curly. I'll send you a picture of what I looked like.
Yes, we'll insert that.
Yeah, we'll insert that. Because when I was in the United States was the first time that anyone had ever guessed that I was black. Like, just like really, really light-skinned biracial. I wouldn't mention it if it had only been once. But it wasn't only once. And it was black people who thought I was. And that was so weird to me, because I was like, there's no way. I think it was because of like the spaces I was in. Like, but yeah, but for the sake of propriety and respect, like I do not go around claiming that for myself, because I understand that would be wildly inappropriate. It's just weird to me that it's happened like a handful of times and not just once, or not at all.
You are not responsible for the guesses, and I can totally relate to having had a multitude of guesses in the spaces that I'm in Australia. Depending on who it is, if it is an African person or a person of African descent, they usually can tell that I have some African connection. Just even a few days ago, I was mistaken for Pacific Islander, which is mostly what I got growing up, particularly Fijian. Probably because of my hair. I went to school with a lot of Fijians and other South Samoans, Tongans, so that was kind of understandable. Some South America, like Latin American, Ethiopia, Egyptian.
You don't look Ethiopian.
I guess.
I'm not. I don't.
No,
see it. I don't see that one.
I am not seen as a white person in Australia, especially older white Australians. They often think that I've come to Australia from overseas, like I wasn't born here. That's also problematic, because sometimes when you say you're Australian is not an ethnicity, it's a nationality, because unless you are a First Nations person, like you are not native to this
That
land.
land, yeah.
You've come from somewhere. People equate Australian with white, and that's problematic.
Oh my gosh, there goes the GoPro.
3, 2, 1. Okay, we're going deep. How difficult was it having a biracial identity growing up in your experience?
So I think, and this is one of those areas where like you really start to get into the question of like privilege and how that's associated with race and how society racializes different people. Because like I was actually gonna say like, oh, welcome to our video where Adjoa and I talk about being white people, but like that's not gonna register the same for either of us, even though we're basically the same percentage white. But like race isn't genetic, right? So like if the two of us were to walk down the street together, if I speak to a North American context, people would be like, oh, there is a white guy and a black girl walking together, right? And it's like it's the weirdness of race. So I think for me, like it was not difficult for me growing up at all. I think I can remember the first time I ever had someone say something discriminatory to me about being Asian, like was in high school. Like I think I must have been in grade 10 or 11 or something like that. And that was the first time someone had ever just like said something to me about like, oh, you Asian. Like I was with a bunch of other Asians and they grouped me in with them. And I was like, it was weird because I was so used to being perceived as white or like white, but what are you? Right? And that's everyone's favorite way of asking is what are you, which has always been interesting to me. But yeah, that was the first time I had been like lumped in with other Asians. So it was like, oh, that's offensive that you said something to us like that. Also, thank you for seeing me.
Yeah, the nuance there.
Finally. Like to me, I mean, that's white privilege. I get to kind of just skirt by with people assuming that I'm normal, whatever the heck that's supposed to mean. I think for me, the challenges were more so feeling connected to a culture where like I didn't retain much of what I did pick up in my early life of the language. Like my grandparents would speak Japanese to us, and for a little while me and my sisters would like be able to understand some things and respond in English, but like that level of comprehension didn't stick around very long. And for a long time I think I felt insecure about like, oh, I'm not like a real Asian because like I can't even speak my language, which I think is like really, really delegitimizing. And then especially if you think about like the history of like colonialism and imperialism, those layers get much more complicated when you start asking like, okay, as an Okinawan person, what even is my language? Because really it's not Japanese, it's Uchinaguchi, which like my dad and his siblings didn't even speak. Like my grandparents could speak that to each other, and my dad told me that they would talk in like the native Okinawan language and their kids couldn't understand them at all because it's just not mutually intelligible with Japanese at all. So it's one of those things where I think, you know, kids who are from a certain diaspora or people who are from like colonial or imperialist like colonies of other countries, I think it's really easy to like delegitimize your own connection to a place when there are like forces way bigger than you that have contributed to like why you're not connected to your language in the way you'd like to be, or like why you haven't had a chance to experience X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, like there wasn't a chance and that's not your fault. So kind of coming to terms with those things. I didn't face a lot of challenges externally growing up.
Right.
I think a lot of what the challenges were for me were internal and figuring out like, what do I get to claim and what do I get to feel like I'm legitimately a part of. One of the funniest stories that my mom has held on to was they would tell me, oh yeah, Max, you and your sisters, you're half white and half Japanese. And like at my youngest stage, I didn't understand, like, what's genetics? I don't understand how that works. So I would look at my hand and be like, so which finger is which finger is Asian and which finger is like white? Like, I don't understand. Like, where are the lines? Where are the lines? Um, which obviously,
Where are the borders?
yeah, clearly. But that's the thing, is you have to grow up learning that, like, you don't live with borders. You're just you.
Did you feel like there was a lot of people trying to box you in or tell you how you should identify, or was it kind of an unspoken feeling of not being understood?
I think it was largely something that was coming from inside myself, and
Okay.
and the reason I can say that pretty confidently is partly like because I grew up in Toronto, probably one of the most diverse cities in the world. When I was going to school, like, everybody was there. The Lebanese kids are over here, and the Jamaicans are over here, the Chinese and Korean kids are over here, and everyone is just mixing. Everyone is just like interacting with each other. So to me, there was never a sense of like, oh, if you're this, you have to be this way, because almost every other person you met in class was just like, oh, I have a completely unique story of like where my family is from. And to me, it never felt like I was weird or out of place, because like I wasn't the only half Japanese kid in my high school. Like, there was a handful of others. I think that was a huge benefit for me. Part of it was my parents actually actively chose, like, when they were having kids, they were like, where do we want to raise mixed kids? And they were like, oh, Toronto. And it's not to say that Toronto is like a paradise or something, because there definitely still is racism in Toronto. And I think it's always asymmetrical. Like, the darker the skin tone of your heritage, the more obvious the racism is going to be. I feel like that's pretty global. But like,
Right.
in the broad scope of things, they were like, okay, if we're going to have the best chance at them feeling like accepted, probably not gonna they had both lived in the States, and they were like, we're not gonna do the United States.
You describing your early experience at school, having other very unique people around, that was definitely my experience in high school. But in primary school, I felt different. I lived in a predominantly white area. There was some other cultures, but there was not many African people at all. I do remember kids making comments about my skin, about my hair. I think it also comes down to Western beauty standards of beauty. I did feel that I was sort of seen as maybe like less attractive. They didn't perceive my features or how I looked as beautiful. As much as it can be hard as if you're getting bullied at school, I think if you have a family or extended family, you can repair that, because you're like, oh, well, you said this to me, but I know that's not true. The older I got, the challenge became less about other people, what they saw me as, and what you said about that internal feeling.
You navigate a lot of in-between spaces.
Is there any final parting words you would like to share, Max?
I would just say to anyone who's watching this, whether you've got a mixed background, or you're just a child of immigrants, or whatever, you are not currently living where your family is from, it's never too late to reconnect to something. And you owe yourself the chance to feel rooted somewhere. So if you have any opportunities to do that, whether it's food, whether it's clothing, music, dance, philosophy, language, whatever it happens to be, or even if it's just conversations with family and friends who are like more connected than you are, like, take those chances. I don't think you'll ever regret finding a sense of connection, and it's always worth it.
My only final words would just be to resound what you said, Max, but also thank you so much for being so generous and engaged in this conversation and really authentic with your experiences. And I am really grateful that I've met you through Passionfroot, and
the feeling is extremely mutual.
I really enjoyed this. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and if we'd be more than happy to keep the conversation going in the comments as well. If you would like to share more about your experience, we'd love to read about it and engage. So Yes, until the next time.
And I think there will be a next time. Most definitely.
Definitely.
Let's actually say goodbye to the audience properly.
Yeah.
Peace out,
Yeah, let's
everybody.
say bye,
Thank you for
bro.
watching. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye. Okay.